Hi there. Happy Thursday to you too. Let's see. I've got to mute something. This one. There we go. Well, good morning and good afternoon to you if you're in a different time zone, as I happen to be. I am broadcasting from Arkansas for As Above Academy for our Twitch live stream, Grounding and Meditative Contemplation. Invite you to take a couple of deep breaths with me and just land here together in shared space. It's so interesting to me to be here with my daughter and two of my grandchildren. Something that's been on my mind and in my heart these last few days as I've been here in this space has been this awareness of myself. Basically, I'm not feeling like a solid being. I'm feeling like a stream of energy, if that makes any sense. And I'm having the experience of feeling myself moving like a river. And I see my daughter's slipstream of her life, having been part of mine for so many years, and gradually having diverged. And she's got her own river now, with these two little streams of her children that are branching out even again from her. And yet, as I entwine with them emotionally and sharing space and conversation, just playing with them and being with them, I'm recognizing that the river of my own life is inexorably entwined with theirs. And that there's going to come a day when I'm not on this planet anymore. But the river of my life goes on. It goes on uninterrupted in its own way because it flows through my daughter into my grandchildren and directly at this point through me into my grandchildren. And it made me think backwards. I started thinking about my own grandmother, grandparents, all four of them actually, but one in particular that I was extremely close to. And I can feel the energy of her inside me, even though she's been gone for decades. And, my mother is still alive. My mother's 89, my father's 88. They're both still alive. And I can watch their slipstreams of energy fading, diminishing, declining. And I'm conscious that the rivers of their lives are so close to complete. I don't know when they will be gone, but I know it can't be too much longer. And that also gives me pause as I start to realize this is just, I'm just talking now about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations in my little narrow lifetime that I've seen and touched and felt and held. And I'm thinking, my goodness, this river of aliveness goes back and back and back, all the way back to the earliest humans and before, to the hominids, and before that to the mammalian family that we emerged out of, and before that to whatever birds and lizards and other creatures and insects also were part of that deep, rich history of life. Bacteria, viruses, down to the very first single cells. And all of that essence of life is in me. And I have passed that on to my children and my grandchildren. And there's no understanding, no knowledge of when that will end. and, and yeah, it blows my mind to realize that we are so conditioned to think of ourselves as these fixed little objects in space and time, and to lose touch with the fact that everything that we have given and shared and been part of with everyone in our world. Good question, Ariana. What does it look like for people without children? It looks the same because you have had intimate exchanges with me. So you're in my soul and I'm in yours. And the things that I share with my grandchildren, some of those come from conversations that we've had, things I've learned from being in relationship with the other people I love, not necessarily even blood relationships. So, the way that my children love my husband, for example, and my grandchildren love my husband. He's not their biological father or grandfather. He's a stepfather and a step-grandfather. And yet the grandchildren have no understanding of the difference between the relationship they have with him and the relationship they have with my ex-husband. Both are grandfathers. They love them equally because both have been intimate parts of their lives from birth onward. So it's not even about the blood and the DNA. It's about the soulfulness that we give to one another. That's really where I was heading with this, is it's beyond the level of simply joining our genes to create new generations. That consciousness gives us this amazing opportunity to exchange our feelings, our thoughts, our understandings, our wisdom, our love, our suffering, all of it with the others in our world. And I was having a conversation not long ago with my grandson, talking to him about, he was actually fussing because he was upset with something that his sister was doing. And he's like, why is she making me so sad? And I said, she's not making you sad. You're making yourself sad because you're giving her the ability to make you sad. And you're giving her the power to do that. That's your power. You don't have to give it away. You can keep your power. And you can decide whether or not you want to be sad. Why would you let her behavior make you sad? Those are the kinds of lessons that are so fascinating to share with young ones and have them start thinking about what power is, what energy is, what it means to exchange ideas and feelings. And I've been really basking in the experience of noticing myself as just being space, that awareness itself is the space in which all of these exchanges happen. And then that makes me wonder, what is awareness? What is it? Is there one awareness having a multiplicity of experiences through these different forms and different relationships that we have? And yes, it does seem like other people are causing our experience. Certainly other people are transmitting energy and behaving in ways that impact us. But the interpretation is always ours. I remember listening to Eckhart Tolle at one point, and whatever you feel about Eckhart Tolle, he has some very beautiful ways of describing what I would call how we center ourselves in our power. And one of the examples he gave about people causing our experience and questioning that, he said, if you were standing in line at a movie theater and waiting to buy your tickets and someone bumped you from behind, like really suddenly and jolted you, a lot of us might have the reaction of, hey, what's wrong with that person? And turn around, maybe even to scold them or to react harshly Because in our interpretation, before we even turn around, we are assuming that person is being rude, that person isn't being thoughtful, they didn't notice that I was here, they should be paying more attention. We put all these parameters and interpretations on other people's behavior. And yet if you turned around to have a conversation with the person who bumped into you, and you noticed that they were holding a white cane with a red tip, it would totally change your experience. So the interpretation that we give to the experience so often is what causes us to feel the way that we feel. And we can say, oh, that person didn't show up because they're irresponsible and they didn't do what they said they would do because they're this or they're that or they don't care. Or we can simply say they didn't show up. They didn't do it. And that's the reality, is they didn't show up and they didn't do it. And all we have to do is address the reality. We don't have to make more meaning of it than that, and yet we do. We are compelled so often to project meaning into reality, to try to make sense of it so that we can control it, manipulate it, or change it in some way to better suit our expectations. When oftentimes just recognizing that it's our expectations that are making us suffer. And that's why we get ourselves into so much difficulty so often. I think another good example is the example of if you're driving down a highway and it's raining and suddenly you have a flat tire and you're all alone in your car. Yes, suffering is totally optional. That is true. Pain is not necessarily optional. Pain is a signal. But suffering is what we do with the story inside of our heads when we worry it and we chew it and we turn it into something enormous that then becomes this problem that we have to deal with, rather than a simple understanding that this is what it is. So back to the car example. We get a flat tire in the rain and it's dark and we're on the road. Now, certain people who have a sort of non-dual, life is just meaningless generally and that none of it matters, they might get out and sit on the curb and sing Kumbaya until someone comes to rescue them. And that's not necessarily a particularly powerful way to be, but it's one way to be. Someone who makes meaning out of the situation in the way that I'm talking about initially would be they'd get out and maybe they get angry. Why is this happening to me? I have somewhere I have to be. The world is in my way. Maybe they even open the trunk and they take out the tire iron and they're so upset they throw it down the hill just because they're furious. And now they've got to go down in the mud and fetch the tire iron and bring it back to change the tire. Or you can just get out of the car and say, the tire's flat. I need to get to where I'm going to go, and so I will just change the tire as peacefully and with as much awareness of what I'm doing as possible, because that's the way I'm going to get to my destination with the least amount of muss and fuss. And that's the part we have such a hard time with so often, because the impulse is to push, 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 and find a reason why it's the world's fault that something is going the way we don't want it to go, rather than just noticing it's not happening and dealing with it. And I see this in my grandchildren, the way that they can make mountains out of molehills. Stop looking at me, don't touch me, I wanted chocolate instead of vanilla, That's not the colored cheese I like. All of these small little details that are the tiniest little challenges in the world become enormous obstacles in the mind of someone whose consciousness is constricted. And that item becomes the only thing that they can see, think about, and feel. So for me, learning how to expand my awareness to hold space for all of it, for the irritation, for the frustration, for the expectations that are dashed, for the friction that shows up in the day-to-day reality that we all experience. Just seeing them as notes in a song rather than as these giant hurdles or obstacles that we're struggling to climb over. Right-sizing them, I think I mentioned that before, to right-size our challenges is so beneficial when it comes to moving more gracefully in the world, because we don't have control over other people's actions or feelings or thoughts or opinions or perspectives. We barely have that over ourselves. If you really stop to think about it, that's a struggle. Learning how to have self-control and some discernment about what we're saying and doing and how we're being in the world. So if we struggle with self-control and discernment, it's going to be challenging to struggle to control other people and to require them to show up for us the way we want them to show up. What are you saying here, Ariana? It takes time to practice. Yes, absolutely. The moment of irritation is the signal that the world has not lived up to our expectations. And then we can be angry, we can express that irritation, or we can follow the signal down to the expectation and say, what am I holding on to so tightly? Maybe there's something here I can let go of. Maybe it's okay if I just sit and relax and allow my grandson to fuss for a few minutes rather than try to fix his situation. I can do that. I can actually breathe into it and I can allow him to have his feelings and express his feelings. And he has big feelings at 6. He has way big feelings. And for me as a grandmother, I'm not used to being around children with way big feelings anymore. It's been a long time since I've had to cope with how to manage that. So there's a opportunity for me in the day, all day with these children, to remind myself that they're not adults and that my expectations of how adults should behave have to be set aside while I allow them the struggle of learning what it means to have big feelings and learning how to manage those feelings in more appropriate ways. And that means some of their expressions are going to be inappropriate. And I have to be okay with that. My expectations have to shift in order for me not to suffer because they're struggling. So, my 6-year-old feelings, yes. Oh, it's been fascinating. I mean, waking up this morning was a trip because my daughter disappeared. You know, she disappeared from their world because she's away on a trip for several days. So they woke up this morning with her not here. And my granddaughter, who's 10, did a beautiful job getting herself dressed and ready for school. But my grandson totally melted down. I want mommy, I want mommy. You know, and he put his shorts on with both of his legs in one leg hole, and he didn't want to take them off and put them in the other leg hole. He wanted to just sit there with both legs in one leg hole and cry about how he couldn't fix it and he couldn't put his shirt on. And you know, for me, the dance of finding, yes, I want mommy. That I heard a lot of that. I need to call her. Well, of course, she was an hour earlier, and this was 6:30 here, so it would have been 5:30 in the morning where she is. So I convinced him that we could call her after he had an opportunity to get himself together and put his clothes on properly, get his shoes and socks on, pick out his snacks for school, get his backpack organized. And if he still managed to do that and we had time left over before we had to walk to the bus, then we would make the phone call. And just making that little concession that, okay, there is a way for you to touch mommy, but it has to go through this little process first, worked. And he was then very calm and able to do the things he wanted to do or needed to do in order to do what he wanted to do, which was reach out and touch mom. And she didn't answer the phone, unfortunately, but he was able to leave her a message, that he loved her and missed her. And that was enough. That was enough to move his heart to a state of peace. So, for me, it's a reminder that these sensitivities that we all have require so much patience and compassion on the part of those who are experiencing our breakdowns and being with us during our breakdowns. And, it's not just kids who have these breakdowns. As adults, we have them too. We tend not to fall into crying jags too often. But certainly we have our irritations and frustrations and our little, oh, why did that person do that? I can't stand it, fits. And just the noticing of that impulse to discharge that energy rather than follow it internally down to the source and notice that we're creating the story that is causing our own upset. It should have been different. Why didn't they do it differently? How come I'm the only one? All of those narratives that we line up behind to project our frustrations and our upsets outward rather than owning them internally as our creations and just dealing with the challenges, because every dashed expectation is just a challenge. It's another challenge that we have to meet, to move through, to ultimately get to where we want to go or achieve what we want to achieve. And we're the ones throwing the obstacles in our own way with the narratives that distract us from making the choices we need to make to move through the challenge. And instead, debating endlessly with ourselves, why other people didn't do it the way we thought they should do it, or aren't behaving the way we think they should behave, or didn't show up for us the way that they promised, and all of these narratives that we have about what others should and shouldn't do. And I think what I'm coming to in my own life is just, I am one long running experiment. I am a river of exploration. And all of these little streams of engagement that I'm participating in, they go on without me. And in a couple of days, I'll be out of here and back in my home, but my grandchildren will still be carrying the energy of the experiences that we've had over these past few days and will continue to have. And how I touch them, how I influence them will matter. That's fascinating to me, that there's ripple effects of the energy that we leave behind. And it is my mission while I am here in this space to do my best to leave beautiful memories for them to carry, so that between now and the next time I see them, if they think of me or if they hear my name, they'll feel good to remember that I was here. And isn't that true of life? If you really expand it, Ariana, yes, our rivers intersect and then they move apart and they wrap in and around and about. And the reality is, when we touch people deeply, part of us stays with them always. And that's the beauty. And I guess that's the question that we live in, is what part of ourselves are we leaving with other people when we touch them and then dance on? So that's going to be my inquiry for today. And I invite you to ask yourself the same question. What are the elementals in my river that I'm leaving and touching other people with? Am I giving them grace? Am I leaving them with compassion? Am I leaving them with wisdom? Am I leaving them with peacefulness? Because those are the choices that invite the kind of intimacy and harmony that I think most of us want. And yet, whether or not we actually support ourselves in being those calm waters when we flow and engage with others. That's the open question. And that's our choice. So I want to thank you for being here with me today and walking through that rather convoluted thought process. You can thank my grandchildren for taking me down that little stream of wonder. And I look forward to talking with you all again soon. I'll be back on next Thursday, same time, different place. Flow, 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 absolutely. And flow as beautifully and calmly and sweetly as you can. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.